Hello everyone, welcome to the poem The Roadside Stand by Robert Frost. We'll be covering this poem in two parts. This is the first part, of course. In this video, we'll be discussing the line by line explanation of this poem. Moving on. About the poem, Robert Frost's poems are concerned with the human tragedies and fears, his reaction to the complexities of life, and his ultimate acceptance of the burdens. In this poem, A Roadside Stand, Robert presents the lines of poor, deprived people with pitiless clarity and with the deepest sympathy and humanity.
Have you ever stopped at a roadside stand? What have you observed there? I think the picture right here will give you a fair idea of what the poem would be like.
Moving on, lines 1 to 6.
A Roadside Stand by Robert Frost. The little old house was out with a little new shed. In front, at the edge of the road where the traffic sped. A roadside stand that too pathetically pled. It would not be fair to say for a dole of bread, but for some of the money, the cash, whose flow supports the flower of cities from sinking and withering faint. Someone from among the village folk had a shack beside a highway that ran to a city nearby. The man extended his shack to the front to open a makeshift counter to sell his farm items like berries or its squash. It was a small entrepreneurial venture to make some little money to meet his ends. Cars passed along the highway, but few stopped to buy anything from him. In fact, no one evinced any interest in his items, even avoiding to cast a glance towards it. Even a minuscule fraction of the money the city dwellers were awash with eluded the shack owner. He vainly looked at the passer-bys with eyes seeking attention. His rudimentary counter didn't merit any traveller's curiosity.
Moving on to lines 7 to 15.
The polished traffic passed with the mind ahead, or if ever aside a moment, then out of sorts at having the landscape marred with the artless paint of signs that with N turned wrong and S turned wrong, offered for sale wild berries in wooden quarts, or crook-necked golden squash with silver warts, or beauty rests in a beautiful mountain scene. You have the money, but if you want to be mean, why keep your money and go along? No doubt, the travellers belong to the well-to-do class. The glitz and the glamour they are used to was singularly lacking in the wayside counter. Seldom did they look at it. If ever they did, it was more to express disgust at the poorly painted and poorly displayed north-south direction board. Clearly, they remained aloof. The humble farmer's soliciting eyes had little impact on them. The farmer offered wild berries, kept in antique looking jars, the freshly extracted juice kept in not so enticing containers. The city folks passing past the humble counter looked joyfully at the rocks and mountains that stood in the backdrop, but felt it below their status to stop over to buy such fresh produce from the lowly grower's farm. Their wealth had made them blind to such humble but priceless offering coming straight from the fields.
Moving on to lines 16 to 22.
The hurt to the scenery wouldn't be my complaint so much as the trusting sorrow of what is unsaid. Here, far from the city, we make our roadside stand and ask for some city money to feel in the hand, to try if it will not make our beings expand. and give us the life of the moving pictures promise that the party in power is said to be keeping from us. The ramshackle sack stands as a blot against the beautiful backdrop of the greenery and the distant mountains. For the bloated travelers, the shack is a spoiler of the landscape, a grotesque imposition. They avoid looking at the counter, unmindful of the fervent desire of the humble villagers' struggle to fight the hardships of life with a tiny portion of the cash from the travelers' overflowing wallets. The indifference of the wealthy city folks is clearly disgusting. The political power is clearly tilted in favor of the city dwellers.
Moving on to lines 23 to 31.
It is in the news that all these pitiful kin are to be bought out and mercifully gathered in, to live in villages next to the theatre and the store, where they won't have to think for themselves anymore, while greedy good doers, beneficent beasts of prey, swarm over their lives, enforcing benefits that are calculated to soothe them out of their wits. And by teaching them how to sleep, they sleep all day, destroying their sleep at night the ancient way. A new relocation plan for these poor villages is in the offing. In the pretense of giving them the comforts of the urban life, these simple folks will be forcefully uprooted from their land and made to live inside the urban limits beside the theatres and malls. No one bothers to take their consent, nor to study how disoriented the village folks will feel in the new habitats. By sweet talking the gullible rural folks, the land sharks will fleece them of their ancestral lands and condemn them to live in the urban centers. Such trickery will never be called to account, and the villagers will painfully struggle to adjust to the new ways of earning a living. Undoubtedly, the change will bring them misery. Their simple lifestyles will be destroyed, and in the new habitat, they will lose sleep, implying that life will become riddled with difficulties. On the other hand, the manipulators and the wolves in the garb of benefactors will enjoy their lives in greater luxury.
Moving on to lines 32 to 43.
Sometimes I feel myself I can hardly bear the thought of so much childish longing in vain, the sadness that lurks near the open window there, that waits all day in almost open prayer for the squeal of the brakes, the sound of a stopping car, of all the thousand selfish cars that pass. Just one to inquire what a farmer's prices are, and one did stop, but only to plough up grass, in using the yard to back and turn around, and another to seek the way to where it was bound, and another to ask could they sell it a gallon of gas. They couldn't, they had none. Didn't it see? The poet feels distraught. He knows he is expecting something that his cruel world can't deliver. This resignation makes him angry and sad. The humble farmer looks on expectantly at each and every passing cars, hoping that they would stop and make some purchases. However, his wait remains futile. The passengers in the cars seldom bother to stop near the sack. Buying anything from such a poorly exhibited stall is below the dignity. The humble farmer looks on vainly, hoping that he could sell something at least to carry home a little cash. At rare intervals, cars do stop, but it is either for asking some direction to the city or taking a turn in his backyard, or for filling gas. The farmer's heart breaks when such visits, which are few and far between, do not result in any tiny business for him. The attitude of the wealthy folks leaves the poet exasperated.
Moving on to the last stanza, lines 44 to 52.
No, in country money, the country scale of gain, the requisite lift of spirit has never been found. Or so the voice of the country seems to complain. I can't help owning the great relief it would be to put these people at one stroke out of their pain. And then next day, when I come back into the sane, I wonder how I should like you to come to me and offer to put me gently out of my pain. The poet regrets that despite the enormous wealth of the country and its vast sources of earning, social welfare and concern for the downtrodden in rural areas have never been the national agenda. The conscience of the nation is muted and muffled towards the citizen who barely scratch a living off their lands. The compassionate poet dreams that he could, in one master stroke, banish the sorrow and suffering of the toiling and deprived masses from the morass of poverty. But when the magic spell would get over, hard realities would bite. He would make the sagely poet sad again. He wants his readers to offer a helping hand to overcome the shock.
We'll continue this poem in part 2. Thank you for listening.